Today marks 10 days since this banger Hollow Knight Silksong dropped on our balls, and it has already climbed to be my favorite game of all time, surpassing Resident Evil 4, which surpassed Hollow Knight, which surpassed Resident Evil 7. These franchises have been going band for band in my life. Will Resi 9 surpass Silksong? Only time will tell. I don't think so, because this game is absolute peak cinema. Cinema not without its flaws, however. In fact, the Steam ratings keep dropping. Right now, the total reviews for Silksong sit at only a mostly positive, with English reviews being at very positive, and Hollow Knight itself, the first game, has seen record negative reviews this month. Now, while most of these mostly positive is mostly skill issue, as a lot of these complaints just comes down to plebeians joining this franchise for the first time and being like, game too hard. Same shit that Elden Ring suffered through and Dark Souls suffered too, and any other game that requires an ounce of skill. And while I would love to sit here and roast these people all day fucking long, go to Pound Town on them, I do have genuine criticisms about this game that I want to get out before this game becomes an hood classic in my head and I only look at it through rose-tinted glasses. Right now it's fresh in my memory, and if you're wondering where I am in the game to be able to talk about these things, I am deep into Act 2. Obviously you can check my playthrough out if you want more specifics. I've been having a blast playing this game on my channel. You can also subscribe in the meantime to support me and become a true gamer. Seriously, hitting the subscribe button makes you 10 times better at Silksong. Trust me. Complaint number 1. Double damage. The most rampant complaint for Hollow Knight Silksong. Now, my stance about double damage is very simple. I don't care that enemies start doing double damage at the very start of the game, simply because Hornet can easily heal 3 health. She can do that mid-air. If enemies didn't do double damage and they had the same level of difficulty that Hollow Knight did, Silksong would be a cakewalk. The only thing I would change with double damage is maybe the most smallest, simplest, basic of enemies. They shouldn't be doing double damage because that just feels a little cheap. But I genuinely believe that a lot of these complaints about double damage is just so blown out of proportion. And one thing that magnifies this double damage issue is my complaint number 2, environmental hazards doing double damage. Now, thankfully, that is a complaint that has already been addressed. In the latest patch of Silksong that dropped, I think, yesterday when I'm recording this video, or 2 days ago, they removed a lot of double damage hazards from this game. For example, minor spoilers ahead, but in the blasted steps, those worms that stick out of the ground that basically act as your environmental hazard for that area, they used to do 2 damage, now they do only 1. And this has been implemented to a countless amount of hazards in the game, so make sure you update your game when you're playing. Unfortunately, I'm already so far ahead in the game that I wouldn't be able to give a good assessment of if the change is good enough until I replay the game from the start, right? But I'm hoping that that problem is now long gone. However, that does compound into the third problem, which is runbacks. I have heard that some bosses' runbacks are abysmal. So far, I've only encountered one of those, and again, very minor spoilers ahead, you have seen this boss in promotional material countless times since 2019. You know about this boss even if you have never played Silksong. It's the last judge. The runback to the last judge was so fucking awful. I was bitching about it all the time in that episode of Silksong, and at first I thought that was just me, but then I talked to some fellow YouTubers who are also playing the game, and they've had the same issue with the last judge. And once again, lo and behold, Team Cherry came in like Jesus and saved the day, where they nerfed the run back of the last judge by removing some enemies and taking care of some environmental hazard double damage issue. So that's pretty nice. But I've heard that there's some other run backs in this game later on, like late Act 2, that are really shitty and stinky, and we'll see about them when we get there. The boss run backs might be bad, but I think the complaints about bosses being too hard is just straight up skill issue. There hasn't been a single boss yet that has taken more than 10 attempts. And even the 10 attempts it was taking was because I was being too greedy and playing like an idiot. And I'm not necessarily a good player. I didn't even do Pantheon 5 in Hollow Knight because I'm trash at the game. Yet I see complaints about bosses being too hard all the time. 2 bosses already got nerfed, including Moorwing and Sister Splinter. I already roasted people about it because I think it's really silly. And I really hope Team Cherry doesn't neuter bosses furthermore. If exploration is the peanut butter, the bosses are jelly in this game. They are crucial to the Silksong experience, and I think they're fucking perfect. They do not need to be neutered, man. Switching gears completely though, my last 2 complaints of Silksong are about the economy. I think rosaries are bullshit, and there's a couple of reasons for that. A, every single bench in early game costs rosaries. Every little thing you need to do in Silksong will cost you rosaries. There's so many memes about this already, and there's a good reason for that, because it is actually insane on how valuable rosaries are compared to Geo. I think Team Cherry took the criticism criticism of Geo being fucking useless in Hollow Knight to heart. There's all these shops and merchants in Hollow Knight Silksong that sell you some crazy stuff, insane tools and different little things that you could really use, but you rarely have enough rosaries for benches and maps, let alone being able to spend it at a shop. I mean, Team Cherry didn't need to make Silksong that realistic that you can barely afford rent. And I think one big reason is boss rewards. Bosses in Silksong rarely give you rewards. They're just meant for progression. Sometimes they might give you a fucking tool, but rarely, if ever, they give you straight hard cash. In Hollow Knight, a lot of bosses would give you a fuck ton of money. Either directly the boss would explode into money, or after beating the boss, you'd find like a beautiful chest full of gold. None of that exists in Silksong, which makes losing rosaries even more harsh, because in Hollow Knight, if you lost a bunch of Geo, you could defeat a boss and get a big chunk of it back. None of that exists in Silksong. And while yes, you can string the rosaries, you rarely have enough to justify spending like 20 or 40 rosaries to get a couple of strings. Might as well just spend them on something, right? And same goes with shell shards. I have had one complaint throughout Silksong is I use my tools a lot because I really love the tool system. I think the tools are very unique and very, very fun to use. They're already very well balanced because you can only use them a certain amount of times before you have to sit at a bench. Why then, in the name of God, do shell shards need to exist to recharge your tools? In mid-game Silksong, you rarely have enough shell shards to ever use your tools. At least I don't. And there's a lot of reasons for that, right? The first time you go through an area, you're gonna be killing every single enemy, which means you're gonna be collecting a lot of shell shards. You might even hit the limit of shell shards you can hold, which will frustrate you further because you feel like you're wasting them. But then, if you fight a boss and say you die, all the tools you use during that boss fight or that fighting arena, they're just gone, right? Those shell shards are gone. So you keep using them to replenish your tools and eventually you'll just run out of them. So using tools and losing is just a punishment for no reason. It makes you not want to engage with your tools, which I think is silly because like I said, you already can't infinitely spam them. And this problem is made worse when you have to do run backs. When you're backtracking through a previous area, maybe you got a new ability that you can access a new room in, you're not gonna be killing every enemy on the way. You've already done that. You're most likely gonna run past everything to get to the new room you can get to, right? Which means you're gonna be farming less and less shell shards. So if you've reached a certain area in the game and now you feel like you don't want to make any more progress, you just want to go backtrack a bunch, get all these little secrets, it's gonna drain the shell shard supply you have. All in all, I think the system is pretty fucking stupid and it shouldn't really exist. And so far, I haven't really seen any other reason for shell shards other than like you can donate them as quests or whatever. So I hope Team Cherry reconsiders rebalancing the whole economy, both shell shards and rosaries, on how they work to make the player experience better. Like I said, tools are already limited. It's not like spells in Hollow Knight that you can just hit the boss, get the soul, and spam the spell as much as you want. So why not have the tools just replenished for free at a bench? I think that'll make the game a lot better. Now, I had a Forbidden Sixth complaint. That's not a complaint anymore. When I was very new to Silksong, I genuinely did not like the fetch quests. Collect 10 this, collect 20 that. But as the game goes on, they've kind of really grown on me because I realized that I don't need to go out of my way to do that. I just have to play the game. One of the very first fetch quests you get is you need to collect 10 pilgrim shawls. Well, you don't need to go out and specifically do that. Just play the game. You'll eventually get those 10 shawls in pretty quick amount of time. In fact, if anything, it gives me more purpose to explore and fight enemies instead of just running past them. Fetch quests and other kinds of quests have just really grown on me as I've played the game. The quest system in general, I think, is just phenomenal. I think it works really, really well. Again, my only complaint for it is the rewards. Just like with bosses, just like with everything else, the rewards for certain quests is a fucking pathetic. Like, I could have gotten that amount of rosaries in 2 seconds by killing 2 Citadel members, you know? And that just feeds back into my complaint about the Silksong economy. Best part about all these complaints is half of them, like I said, are already being addressed, and the other half can easily be addressed in a later patch. Nothing here is so fundamentally bad that you will have to redesign the whole game for it to be better. Like, for example, when Cyberpunk 2077 came out, yes, the game was riddled with bugs and was an unfinished mess, but those things could be patched out. However, if you had issues with some fundamentals of the game, maybe you fucking hated the story, maybe you hated the missions, no amount of patching would fix that. No amount of redesigning the perk system, the abilities, the skill points would change that for you. If you were expecting a full-blown RPG with Cyberpunk when it was announced, nothing will change the fact that CD Projekt changed it from an RPG to just being an action game. Silksong complaints are not like that at all. At the core, the game is phenomenal. The exploration, the boss fights, the story, the characters, the quests, everything top to bottom has been fucking perfect. This game makes Hollow Knight look like a fucking fan project. And we already know Team Cherry is cooking a second patch for Silksong. I'm actually very excited for it to drop, and I hope that patch is really focused on the economy of the game. Right now for me, Silksong is a solid 9.5 out of 10, but it has a potential to be a 10 out of 10 banger. Let me know your gripes with the game. Is there some things that you just don't like? Is it a skill issue or a game issue? What's your opinion on the trout population in Canada? Let me know all of these things down in the comments below. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and I'll see you tomorrow with a new video. Primacon signing out.